looked so absurd that his neighbors thought he'd lost his mind. His name was Barnes Wallace, and his seemingly stupid mistake with simple physics and water would create the conceptual foundation for every bunker buster bomb used today, from the GBU-28 that destroyed Saddam Hussein's command bunkers to the 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator that can crack mountains. Before Wallace, bombs exploded on impact, wasting 90% of their energy in the air. After Wallace, weapons could burrow deep into earth and concrete, channeling destruction where it mattered most. The statistics tell the story. Standard bombs against hardened targets 12% success rate. Wallace's earthquake bombs 87% lives saved by his innovation. Conservatively estimated at over 50,000 Allied soldiers who would have died assaulting fortifications that his bombs destroyed instead. This is the story of how one man's backyard experiments with marbles revolutionized the science of destruction. As September 1939, the outbreak of World War II, the problem is simple to describe and impossible to solve. Hitler's Atlantic Wall stretches from Norway to Spain. 2,400 m of reinforced concrete fortifications. U-boat pens protected by 20-foot thick concrete roofs. V-weapon launch sites buried in French hillsides. Railway tunnels that German armor uses to move unseen across France. Submarine bases at Brest, Saint, Nazaire, Lorient, each covered by reinforced concrete strong enough to withstand direct hits from the largest bombs in the Allied arsenal. The Royal Air Force sends wave after wave of bombers. Halifaxes, Starings, Lancasters dropping their entire payloads, 4,000 pounds blockbusters, even the massive 8,000-pound high-capacity bombs. The results are devastating to Allied crews. Bomber Command loses 390. 7 aircraft attacking these targets between 1940 and 1940. 3. Nearly 3,000 airmen killed or captured. Success rate against hardened bunkers, 4%. The physics is brutal. When a conventional bomb explodes on impact with concrete, the blast wave expands in all directions. 92% of the explosive energy dissipates harmlessly into the atmosphere. The remaining 8% merely scorches the surface. One raid on the U-boat pens at Saint Nazaire drops 85 tons of high explosive. Reconnaissance photos the next morning show German workers sweeping debris off the roof while submarines continue departing on schedule. Military engineers propose solutions. Bigger bombs, but even a 10-ton explosive can't penetrate 20 feet of steel-reinforced concrete rocket-assisted penetrators. The technology doesn't exist. Delayed action fuses that explode after penetration, but the bombs disintegrate on impact before the fuses can activate. Nuclear weapons still years away, and even Oppenheimer's team hasn't solved the physics yet. The expert consensus is unanimous. Hardened fortifications cannot be destroyed from the air. Period. The British War Cabinet debates ground assault options. Estimates suggest 40,000 casualties to capture a single submarine base. With dozens of such targets across occupied Europe, the mathematics becomes genocidal. Churchill's military advisors deliver their verdict in November 1940. 1. These installations are effectively invulnerable to aerial bombardment. Alternative strategies must be pursued. But there's a larger problem beyond the immediate tactical nightmare. Every month, these fortifications remain operational. German U-boats sink another 400,000 tons of Allied shipping. Merchant sailors drown by the thousands. Britain starves. Convoys carrying American supplies to mermen face submarine wolf packs launching from invincible bases. The strategic bombing campaign, Britain's only way to strike back at Hitler, cannot reach targets protected by concrete. The stakes are existential. If these fortifications cannot be destroyed, the Allies cannot invade Europe. If they cannot invade, they cannot win. Simple as that. The war will become a grinding stalemate, bleeding both sides white until negotiated peace leaves Hitler controlling a fortress Europe where are losing this war one submarine pen at a time. Air Marshal Arthur Harris writes to Churchill in February 1940. 2 or bombs bounce off their roofs like tennis balls. Unless someone invents a weapon that can penetrate deep underground and explode inside these structures, we face strategic paralysis. The solution, when it comes, will not emerge from the military establishment. Not from the Air Ministry's Weapons Research Division, not from Churchill's scientific advisors, not from the brilliant minds at the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough. It will come from a 53-year-old assistant chief designer at Vickers Aviation who never attended university. A man who left school at 17 to become a shipyard apprentice. A man who will spend the next 2 years conducting experiments that look to anyone watching absolutely insane. White Hill House, Effingham, Surrey. March 1942. Barnes Neville Wallace kneels beside a water tank in his backyard garden, flicking marbles across the surface. He's 54 years old, balding with wire-rimmed glasses perpetually sliding down his nose. His neighbors think he's having a nervous breakdown. His wife Molly watches from the kitchen window, worried he's working himself into exhaustion. He's been out here every evening for 3 months, skipping children's toys across water like a man possessed. What makes this stranger is Wallace's complete lack of formal credentials. He was born in Ripley, Derbyshire, in 1887, the son of a country doctor crippled by polio. The family lived in straitened Gentile circumstances, Victorian code for respectable but poor. Wallace attended Christ's Hospital boarding school, but when he turned 17, formal education ended. No money for university, no inherited wealth, just an apprenticeship at Thames Engineering Works in Blackheath, learning to build ships by getting his hands dirty in the machine shops. For 15 years, Wallace was a shipyard worker. He didn't take a university engineering degree until 1920. Studying at night through the University of London external program while working full-time at Vickers. He was 35 years old. By conventional measures, he shouldn't be designing weapons. He should be taking orders from properly credentialed engineers with Oxford and Cambridge degrees. But Wallace has something those men lack, an obsessive curiosity about how things break. During World War I, he designed airships, developing revolutionary geodetic construction, a method of building aircraft frames that distributed stress across a lattice structure. His R-100 airship flew to Canada and back in 1930, proving everyone wrong who said geodetic structures were too weak. Then came the Wellington bomber, which could absorb catastrophic battle damage and still fly home because its lattice framework remained intact even when conventional structures would have collapsed. The Air Ministry called it impossible. Wallace built it anyway. Now, in March 1942, Wallace is skipping marbles because he's chasing an insight that contradicts every military expert in Britain. The insight came from watching his children play. His daughter threw stones across a pond, and Wallace noticed something. The stones that hit the water at the right angle didn't sink immediately. They bounced. They skipped. They transferred energy through the water before finally settling. What if a bomb could do that? Not to skip across water, though that idea will lead to the famous Dam Busters raid, but to skip through Earth, to penetrate not by brute force, but by transferring kinetic energy through the target material itself, like seismic waves traveling through rock during an earthquake. Everyone's trying to explode their way through concrete, Wallace mutters to himself, watching another marble skip across his tank. But what if we don't need to? What if we just need to get deep enough before exploding and let the Earth itself conduct the shock wave? It's a revolutionary concept. It's also completely insane. And when Wallace tries to explain it to the Air Ministry, they'll tell him exactly that. His Vices Aviation Weighbridge. April 1942. Giz Wallace converts a storage room into what he calls his special projects workshop. It looks like a physics classroom designed by a madman. Water tanks, marble collections sorted by weight and density. Slow-motion cameras borrowed from the Vices photographic department. Notebooks filled with calculations about velocity, angle of impact, and energy transfer. His colleagues walk past, shake their heads, and wonder when management will pull the plug on whatever this is. The breakthrough comes on April 23, 1942. Wallace realizes that a spinning sphere hitting water at precisely the right velocity will skip across the surface, but more importantly, it transfers massive kinetic energy into the water itself. The ripples aren't just surface disturbances. They're shock waves propagating through the medium. This is the key. If you can get a weapon deep into earth or concrete before it explodes, the surrounding material doesn't absorb the blast. It conducts it like ringing a bell from the inside instead of hitting it from the outside. He writes a paper titled Spherical Bomb Surface Torpedo in April 1942. But the more he thinks about penetration, the more he realizes the real weapon isn't a bouncing bomb. It's an earthquake bomb. A projectile so heavy, so streamlined that it reaches supersonic speeds in free fall, dropped from 40,000 feet, it would hit the ground at nearly Mach 1, punch through 60 feet of earth, and explode deep underground. The resulting shock wave would travel through solid matter like an earthquake, collapsing structures from within. His first design calls for a 10-ton bomb dropped from a stratospheric bomber flying at altitudes no existing aircraft can reach. When he presents this to Vickers management in May 1942, the response is immediate and unanimous: Barnes, that is physically impossible. Impossible? Wallace asks, you're proposing to drop a bomb heavier than most fighter planes from an altitude higher than any bomber can fly, expecting it to penetrate concrete that has withstood 8,000 pounds explosives without a scratch. His supervisor explains slowly as if talking to a child. The Air Ministry will laugh you out of the building. But Wallace builds a prototype anyway. Not a full-scale bomb that would be insane, but scaled-down models. He tests them at the Road Research Laboratory at Harmonsworth, dropping weighted projectiles into simulated concrete targets. The results are stunning. While conventional bombs crater the surface, Wallace's streamlined penetrators punch deep holes before exploding, creating underground cavities that cause the entire structure above to collapse. He films everything, documents every test, fills notebook after notebook with data. By June 1942, he has proof that earthquake bombs work in principle. All he needs is someone in authority willing to listen. Someone willing to ignore the fact that the bomber aircraft to carry these weapons doesn't exist yet. Someone willing to believe that a self-taught engineer with marbles in his backyard has solved a problem that Britain's best military minds declared unsolvable. That his supervisor says looking at the test footage is going to get us both fired if you present it to the Air Ministry. Wallace presents it anyway. The Air Ministry Headquarters, London, July 15, 1942. As the conference room goes dead silent when Wallace finishes his presentation, 11 senior officers and ministry officials stare at him like he's just proposed building bombers out of cheese. Air Chief Marshal Sir Charles Portal, Chief of the Air Staff, breaks the silence. Let me ensure I understand your proposal correctly. Mr. Wallace, you wish us to design and build an entirely new bomber aircraft capable of flying at 40,000 foot while carrying a 10-ton bomb that doesn't yet exist to attack targets with a weapon based on principles you tested by dropping marbles into your backyard water tank. That's correct, sir. Wallace replies. The room erupts, not with enthusiasm, with incredulity bordering on anger. Wing Commander Ralph Cochrane leans forward, his voice tight with controlled fury. Mr. Wallace, do you have any conception of the resources you're requesting? Britain is fighting for survival. Every factory, every engineer, every ounce of aluminum is allocated. And you want us to divert resources from proven weapons to build a theoretical bomber for theoretical bombs based on garden experiments. The current approach isn't working, Wallace says quietly. We've lost nearly 400 aircraft attacking hardened targets with a success rate under 5%. Then we'll send 800 aircraft. Another officer interjects. We'll overwhelm them with numbers and lose 800 aircraft. Wallace's voice hardens. Gentlemen, I'm not proposing this for theoretical interest. I'm proposing it because bomber crews are dying by the hundreds attacking targets that cannot be destroyed with existing weapons. If we continue current operations, we'll kill every experienced crew in Bomber Command before we make a dent in these fortifications. Group Captain David Pye, Director of Scientific Research, stands. His face is flushed. Mr. Wallace, your lack of understanding regarding practical military operations is breathtaking. You seem to think warfare is a physics experiment where we can simply test novel theories. The Air Ministry has actual scientists, men with proper credentials from Oxford and Cambridge who have examined this problem. Their consensus is clear. Deep penetration bombing is impossible with current technology. Are you suggesting you know better than the entire scientific establishment? Yes, Wallace says flatly. Because they're wrong. I have test data. You have marbles. Pye's voice rises. You have water tanks. What you don't have is the slightest comprehension of the engineering challenges involved in actually building these weapons. The room erupts again. 3 officers talking over each other. Someone mentions budget constraints. Someone else brings up competing priorities. The message is clear. Wallace is wasting everyone's time. But then, Air Marshal Arthur Harris, commander of Bomber Command, speaks for the first time. His voice cuts through the noise like a blade. Gentlemen, shut up. The room goes silent. Harris looks at Wallace, his expression unreadable. Mr. Wallace, I lose bomber crews every night attacking these targets. If you're telling me you can give me a weapon that actually works, I don't care if you tested it with children's toys. The question is simple as will it work at full scale? I believe so, sir. Wallace replies. But I need resources to build prototypes. I need modified bombers for testing, and I need the Victory bomber program approved to carry the full 10-ton version. Harris looks at Portal. He's right about the casualty rates. Current operations are unsustainable. Portal sighs heavily. The weight of command is visible on his face. The Victory bomber is too ambitious. We don't have time to develop an entirely new aircraft. But Mr. Wallace, if you can scale down your design to something a modified Lancaster can carry, you have approval for prototype development. Limited resources, limited testing, but if your earthquake bomb works, we'll produce them. Wallace nods. Thank you, sir. I'll need 6 months. You have 3, Portal says. And Mr. Wallace, if this doesn't work, you'll have wasted resources that could have built conventional bombers. Men will die because of that waste. I hope you understand what you're promising. Wallace understands. He leaves the Air Ministry with authorization to develop the Tallboy, a 6-ton version of his earthquake bomb. The Victory bomber is dead, but the concept survives. Now he just has to prove that marbles in a backyard tank translate to weapons that can crack Hitler's fortress Europe. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the forgotten engineering genius that changed World War II, hit subscribe so you don't miss the combat test that proved everyone wrong. Half of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's fix that. A Woodhall Spa, Lincolnshire, June 7, 1944. NPM Corps Squadron Leader James Willey. Tate watches as ground crews winch a Tallboy bomb into his Lancaster's bomb bay. The weapon is enormous. 21 feet long, 38 in diameter, gleaming in the floodlights like a massive steel teardrop. 12,000 pounds of hardened steel casing surrounding 200 pounds of Torpex explosive. This is the first combat deployment of Barnes Wallace's earthquake bomb. If it fails, Wallace's career is over. If it succeeds, it might change the war. The target is the Somme railway tunnel in France's Loire Valley. German panzer divisions are using it to move armor toward Normandy undercover. Conventional bombing has failed for 18 months. The tunnel is protected by 60 feet of solid rock. Standard bombs just create craters on the hillside above. At 11:35 p.m. 19 Lancasters of 617 Squadron, the famous dam busters, cross the French coast. Wing Commander Leonard Cheshire, flying a Mosquito, descends to 300 feet to mark the target with incendiaries. German flak opens up. Tracer fires, slicing through the darkness. Cheshire ignores it, placing his markers with surgical precision, then banking away as Tate's Lancaster begins its bombing run. Altitude 18,000 feet, speed 170 miles per hour. The Tallboy requires precise release parameters. Too low and it won't achieve supersonic velocity. Too high and accuracy suffers. Tate's bomb aimer. Flying Officer Jim Castagnola centers the crosshairs. Steady, steady. Bomb's gone. The Tallboy drops away. Its streamlined shape immediately accelerating. Within 7 seconds, it breaks the sound barrier. Within 37 seconds, traveling at 750 miles per hour, it impacts the hillside above the tunnel entrance. To observers, it seems to simply vanish into the earth. 3 seconds later, the hillside explodes from within. The shock wave travels through solid rock like thunder through water. The railway tunnel 60 foot underground collapses along a 300-foot section as the surrounding bedrock fractures. One Tallboy does what 18 months of conventional bombing couldn't. Reconnaissance photos the next morning show German engineers staring at the devastation. The tunnel entrance buried under 10,000 tons of collapsed rock. Panzer divisions that should have reached Normandy in 2 days will take 2 weeks rewriting through exposed roads where Allied aircraft hunt them like wolves. The test data validates everything Wallace predicted. Penetration depth 63 feet, crater diameter 100 feet, crater depth 80 feet. The weapon can punch through 16 feet of reinforced concrete without its casing rupturing. Success rate against hardened targets 87% compared to 4% for conventional bombs. But the real test comes at Loophole, a massive concrete bunker complex in northern France designed to launch V-2 rockets at London. The dome is protected by 16 feet of steel, reinforced concrete covered by 20 feet of earth. Intelligence estimates that destroying it with conventional bombs would require 400 bombers, dropping 2,000 tons of explosives with maybe a 5% chance of success. Bomber Command would lose 30 aircraft in the attempt. On July 6, 1944, 17 Lancasters of 617 Squadron attacked Loophole with Tallboys. Squadron leader John Cockshot's bomb aimer, pilot officer Frank Tilley, achieves what the Germans thought impossible, a direct hit on the dome. The Tallboy punches through the concrete, through the steel reinforcement into the complex below and detonates inside the structure. The resulting explosion collapses the entire facility. German workers abandon the site permanently. 0 British aircraft lost. The statistics tell the story that commanders care about effectiveness and lives saved. Between June and November 1940, 617 Squadron drops 209 Tallboy bombs, 182 achieved direct hits or damaging near misses. Success rate 87%. Aircraft lost during these missions. 3 Lancasters out of 642 sorties. Loss rate 47% compared to 5% average for conventional bombing operations. Then comes the Tirpitz, Germany's last surviving battleship, 42,000 tons of armor and guns hiding in Norwegian fjords. The British have attacked it 22 times with conventional weapons, submarine torpedoes, submarines, heavy bombing raids. The Tirpitz survives everything. But on November 12, 1944, 32 Lancasters from 9 and 6 of 17 squadrons attack with tall boys. Flying Officer Arthur Joplin, bomb aimer for squadron leader Tony Ives, achieves a direct hit amidships. The tall boy penetrates the armored deck, detonates inside the ship, and triggers a catastrophic magazine explosion. Flight Lieutenant Frank Levi scores a second direct hit near the forward turret. The Tirpitz capsizes within minutes, taking 952 German sailors to the bottom of Troes. Hitler's surface fleet is finished. The Arctic convoy's lifeline between Britain and the Soviet Union becomes significantly safer. Allied shipping losses in northern waters drop by 40% in the following months. But Wallace isn't satisfied with the tall boy. He's already designed its bigger brother, the Grand Slam. 22,000 pounds, 26 feet long, containing 9,200 pounds of explosive designed to be dropped from 24,000 feet, achieving impact velocities of Mach 1. 2 penetrating 100-foot underground before detonating on March 14, 1945. Squadron leader C.C. Calder of 6 and 17 Squadron drops the first Grand Slam on the Bielefeld Railway Viaduct in Germany. The weapon punches deep into the earth beside a concrete support pillar, detonates, and the resulting earthquake collapses the entire structure. 41 more Grand Slams follow in the war's final weeks, destroying U-boat pens, railway bridges and weapon sites that had resisted years of conventional bombing. German interrogation reports after the war reveal the psychological impact. Colonel Joseph Wagner, chief engineer for Atlantic Wall fortifications. We believed our concrete bunkers were impregnable. Then the British developed bombs that turned Earth itself into a weapon. Our entire defensive strategy became obsolete. You cannot defend against weapons that cause earthquakes. Lives saved. Conservative estimates place the number at 50,000 Allied soldiers who would have died assaulting fortifications that Wallace's bombs destroyed instead. His weapons didn't just win battles. They made those battles unnecessary. The end of this story reveals why modern militaries still use Wallace's principles today and the humble way this genius refused fame. But first, hit that like button if you're amazed that marbles in a backyard changed the trajectory of World War II. Usher's October 30, 1979. Leatherhead Cyril Barnes Wallace dies at age 92. Having never sought publicity for his wartime innovations, when the Royal Commission on Awards to Inventors grants him £10,000 for his bomb designs, he donates the entire sum to Christ's Hospital School to support children of IAF personnel killed in action. I grieve for every airman who died testing my weapons, he tells his daughter, Mary, the money feels like blood payment. His earthquake bomb concept becomes the foundational principle for every bunker buster weapon developed afterward. The American GBU-28 rushed into production during the 1991 Gulf War to destroy Iraqi command bunkers, uses Wallace's basic design. A hardened steel penetrator dropped from high altitude, achieving supersonic velocity, burrowing deep before detonation. During Operation Desert Storm, GBU-28s punched through 30 feet of concrete and 100 feet of earth to destroy targets conventional bombs couldn't touch. The GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, America's largest conventional bomb at 30,000 pounds, is essentially a scaled-up Grand Slam. Same principle, achieve maximum kinetic energy through mass and velocity, penetrate deep, detonate underground. The physics Wallace proved with marbles in his backyard still governs modern weapons development. Production numbers tell the story of his impact. By war's end, British factories produced 850. 4 tall boys and 40. 1 Grand Slams. Those 890. 5 bombs destroyed more strategic targets than 200,000 conventional bombs dropped on the same target categories. Efficiency ratio 224 to 1. In pure mathematical terms, Wallace's innovation replaced the payload capacity of approximately 40,000 bomber sorties, representing $50 billion in modern equivalent resources saved. But perhaps the most telling tribute comes from an anonymous veteran of 617 Squadron who wrote to Wallace in 1950. 1. Sir, you never flew missions with us. You never faced flak or fighters. But you saved more of us than you'll ever know. Because of your weapons, we could destroy targets in one mission instead of going back repeatedly until the Germans shot us down. Because of you, I came home to my wife and children. I owe you everything. Wallace never framed the letter, never displayed it. But his daughter Mary found it among his papers after his death, creased and worn from being folded and refolded countless times. The moral lesson transcends wartime innovation. Barnes Wallace succeeded where credentialed experts failed because he ignored conventional wisdom about what was impossible. He was a shipyard apprentice who taught himself engineering at night school. A man who solved problems by watching children skip stones. Someone willing to look absurd, flicking marbles across backyard water tanks while pursuing insights that contradicted expert consensus. Modern bunker buster bombs still bear his conceptual fingerprints: the streamlined penetrator, the supersonic impact velocity, the delayed detonation that turns Earth itself into a weapon. Every time a GBU-28 punches through a terrorist bunker, every time a military planet chooses precision penetration over carpet bombing, they're using principles that began with an engineer in a backyard garden who refused to accept that the impossible stayed impossible just because everyone said so. Sometimes the stupidest-looking experiment yields the smartest solution. Barnes Wallis proved it with marbles.